Welcome to Computing at Home with Digital Schoolhouse. My name is Estelle, otherwise known as ComSci Geek. I'm a computing teacher and also develop resources for the programme. We specialise in delivering computing workshops that are accessible, educational and fun. You are watching part 2 of our PartBaked Games workshop, Chef's Edition. This workshop is unplugged, meaning you don't need to have any technology to take part other than a device to play the video. Ideally, you will have needed to have taken part in part 1 of this workshop before taking part today. You can watch any of our previously streamed workshops on our YouTube channel. Just search YouTube for Digital Schoolhouse. To all learners watching, remember you can pause the video at any time to take notes, collect your thoughts, or to take part in the workshop alongside me. The Digital Schoolhouse team are ready and waiting in the chat should you have any questions throughout, and I'll also take 5 minutes to answer your questions at the end of the workshop. During part 1 of this workshop, I had a question about how you could develop game ideas for the Switch. I just wanted to give you a couple of answers in case you didn't see my ideas in the chat at the end of the session. It was just to say that there's a program called Fuse, which you can use to create games directly on the Switch. That uses a text-based language. The other thing that you can do is also the Nintendo Labo kits come with something called the Garage, and you can use that to develop game ideas as well. So there's a couple of ideas there if you did want to develop something for your Switch. Parents and guardians, you might want to watch the next bit as it explains how to access our resources, but after that feel free to join in or sit nearby to supervise if you want to. Let's get started. Okay, so we are going to be hitting the ground running on PartBaked Games Chef's Edition Part 2. Today we're going to be looking at how we can compare two games and also how to modify a game using features from another. So I'm going to go through how to access the resources that you need for today first, and then we'll start to have a look at actually using the different games. So first of all, if you want to access any of our resources, as usual, you can access them on our website. So you need to go to digitalschoolhouse.org.uk. That's digitalschoolhouse.org.uk. Once you're at the website, if you go to Resources tab and click on where it says Live Workshops, scroll down and find the PartBaked Games Chef's Edition. If you're watching this live with me now, obviously that will be at the top. If you're watching a pre-record on YouTube, you might need to scroll further down the page. Click on where it says PartBaked Games Chef's Edition. Scroll down and you'll need the worksheets from the public files. So the files that you're actually going to need for today's session are over here on my visualizer. I'll just show you now. Are the game comparison document and the release game features. So those are the two files. There's one more page that you're going to need as well. That's also a new interaction sheet. So those 3 pages are the pages that you're going to need for today's session. You're also going to need, from last time, your initial ideas and your various different sheets that you did for coming up with your game idea from last time. So it's a good idea to have those handy as well, just in case you want to refer to them as we're going through today's workshop. Don't forget, if you don't have access to a printer, that's absolutely fine. Just get the worksheets up on your tablet or on your phone or whatever you're using, and then you can use pencil and paper, pen and paper to do your own versions of the worksheets just directly onto paper. That's absolutely fine. You'll also need some coloured pens or pencils for today's workshop as well. Okay, so that's everything that you're going to need. Right, so next thing we're going to have a look at is what we're actually going to be doing. So let's have another look. So today's session we are going to be, as I said, comparing two games and starting to think about what sorry, my thing's not working properly, so bear with me a second. We're going to start to think about what our two games are going to look like, and we're going to get an idea of how to compare two games and see the similarities between them. So we're going to play some games to start with. So I'm going to be playing Gigantosaurus, the game, on my Switch, and I'm going to be live streaming for you so you can have a look at the game, and we're going to do a bit of comparison on this. If you have the game, you're more than welcome to join in and do some playtesting yourself. If you don't, sit back, relax and watch me play, and hopefully you'll get some ideas of the kind of things that we're doing. And so this is the Gigantosaurus, the game. This is the actual release title of it from Outright Games that we're going to be playing right now. Okay, so let's hop across and get that ready for you. What I would suggest doing is, while you're playing this game, make sure that you have your game comparison document ready and waiting. So this is this one here. So make sure you've got this one ready, because you're going to need to be looking at the different screens that we're going to be looking at as we're going through. Think about what similarities and differences there are compared to your game. So I'll stop every now and then and we'll discuss as we go along. So just be aware that that's one of the things that we're going to be using as we go through this particular section of today's workshop. So let's, without further ado, go and have a look at Gigantosaurus, the game. How exciting. Right. Okay. So here is the Switch already set up and ready to go. So I am going to head over and open up the Gigantosaurus game, and hopefully it will give us some ideas that we can use in developing and making our game even better. Okay, so we're just loading the game, so just bear with us at the moment. So you'll see things pop up in just a second. Okay, so we're starting to see some of the game logos and the different studios that have worked on this particular game. So that's something that's different to what we've used previously. There's Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine is a game engine for developing games. So that's something else that you might want to look at. It's completely free to download, so you could even potentially download and have a little play with that. So this is the start screen. So I had a start screen as an idea in my resources. So I'm just going to pop over onto my sheets and have a look at what my start screen looked like, and do a little bit of comparison with the one that is in the actual game compared to the one that I had as my idea. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So if I go back to one of the very earliest sheets that we created last time, it was not the initial ideas, it was the sheet that had the four different, the four different screens on it. So my idea was to have the Gigantosaurus, the game, a start button, and the Outright Games logo built into it. So it's a little bit different to the actual game itself. Let's have another little look at that and compare. So you can see that we have the start button, but instead of actually being a start button, because I'm playing on the Switch, it's got an A to confirm that you want to start the game. So that's a little bit different. But whereas my ideas were based around something that would probably be played on a PC, and I had a start button that you could click. So that was a little bit different, but that's partially because of the platform that I was planning my game for. Okay, so the first screen that I'm going to compare is the start screen. So similarities, I've got that it has something to confirm you want to start the game. So something to confirm start of game. And the differences on that is that it is the A button, but that's because it's intended for Switch. So it's a little bit different, but we understand why that's different. The other thing that we had was just before the start, we had all the different logos that were being used for showing us which studios had worked on it. So that's something that was different as well. Logos shown for studios. Oh, and also the engine used to create the game. And we only had the one logo, and we had that actually on the start screen. So that's a little bit different as well. So there's a couple of things there in the start screen that were different from the initial ideas that I came up with for my design. So obviously yours is going to be slightly different. That's absolutely fine, and I'd expect it to be different because hopefully you came up with an idea that was different to mine. So you might find that your game comparison document is a little bit different, and you might find that you've got different similarities or different differences. That's absolutely fine. That's what I would expect to find. Right, so let's head back into the game and carry on and see what happens and see what other differences or similarities we can spot. That's something else that we didn't have. We didn't talk about a load screen, so that's something potentially we could add into our game idea as well. So I might add that into my sheet in a minute. Okay, so we've actually got almost like a second screen for working out when we want to start the game. So we're going to add that in there as well. So just bear with me a minute while I pop over onto the visualizer. Other thing I'm going to do is turn the sound down a little bit because it's a little bit loud. So apologies for that if you can't quite hear me. So I'm just going to change the sound so that you can hear me. Okay, so let's turn that down. Oh, there we go, that's a bit better. So apologies that was a little bit loud. Okay, so we've just noticed a couple of extra things that we didn't have in our original. So we've got some extra screens. We had a load screen. I'm actually going to just jot these in as like a couple of extra ideas. So we had a load screen. And we can just put that, we didn't have one of those. There we go, we didn't have a load screen. And the other thing we had is almost like a starting animation, which is just playing at the very beginning of the game to give us an idea of a little bit of what we're going to be doing in the actual game. So we call that a cutscene, so we could call that a starting cutscene. So I'm going to call that starting cutscene. And again, we didn't have one of those in our ideas. A starting cut scene. Okay, oops. Okay, so there we go. So we haven't got any similarities on those because we didn't have them in our actual ideas, initial ideas. Right, so now let's go on and start to do our very first adventure. So let's head into the game and have another look at similarities and difference in between our title, our ideas for our prototype, and the actual release title. So we've got a couple of extra things in our second start screen. So actually that's something else that's a little bit different. There were kind of two start screens. There was one to tell us about how the autosave worked, and then a second one which comes up, which is the main start screen. So we could write a little bit about that. I'm not going to bother right now, but you could add a little bit more detail about that. The start screen that talks about the autosave perhaps won't necessarily come up every time you play the game because you might not need that information every single time. So we're going to start with a new adventure. This is something else that we didn't have in our version. I can choose what game mode I want to play, if I want to play it as easy or regular, and you can then choose between them and also change it anytime in the options menu again. We could add that detail into our start screen if we wanted to. It's up to us, you don't have to. I'm going to go for regular.
Of all kinds. It's a wondrous place, nice and safe, though dangers can arise. Why, if it isn't Cror and Totor, a pair of sneaky velociraptors. They stole a baby egg. Oh, what a disaster. Say hello to our friends. Rocky, Tiny, Bill, and Mazu. Rocky throws the ball. Mazu, look out behind you. Cror takes a nasty bump. Stars circle her eyes, but Totor is determined to win back their stolen prize. The raptors take the egg and run. Despite the gang's determination, the egg appears lost for good. until Mazu makes an observation. Behold, what's this? Look there upon the ground. The raptors left behind footprints. That's how they'll be found.
Okay, so we've got something different again to what we've seen previously, and this time we had another cutscene, but this time it was like an introductory cutscene. It explained what we're going to need to be doing for this particular game and sort of the background to the challenge that we're going to be undertaking. So that's something that we can add into our detail as well. So I'm just going to hop onto the visualizer and I'm going to add a little bit of detail in about the introductory cutscene. So we're going to call it an intro cutscene. And again, we don't have one of these, so we haven't got any similarities, but we do have differences. So we can say that they didn't have one of these. An intro cutscene. But we can talk about a little bit about what it's used for. But we can use this to intro the quest or the reason for playing the game. There we go. So that might be something that we want to think about doing. So that kind of alleviates the need to have a screen which explains how to play the game. You might have also noticed that when the proper game started, that we started to see some instructions coming up telling us how to play the game as well, which is also a really nice little feature that you can include right at the very beginning of starting to play your game. So if I go back and have one more look at what I've done so far in my initial ideas, I had the start screen, which allowed you to play the game. I then had character selection, so this is something that hasn't happened in my game at all so far. So I could add that in here as another example of something that isn't in my game. So this was character selection. So in similarities, it wasn't in the actual game. There we go. Oops, that should actually be in the differences. Never mind. You can put it in the right box. It wasn't in the actual game, but was relevant to the type of game that I designed. So it might be that some of the things that you've included work because of the kind of game that you've come up with, because of the game designer ideas that you used. So be aware, again, things might be slightly different, but it might be necessary for the game that you've created. Was relevant for game idea. So my idea was a racing game, and the idea was that you could select the different characters to race with them, so it kind of worked with that. Okay, so let's head back in and see what happens when we start to play the game. So one of the things that's quite nice that I quite like about this straight away is that it's got in front of me like a little trail to follow, so I know where I need to go. So this is very much, as we talked about last time when we talked about the audience, we talked about this being probably like a first game, or one of the first games that the audience might well be playing. So I can also see in the top right hand corner, which is just under our Digital Schoolhouse house, it's obviously wanting me to collect these little jewels or like drop things. So I'm starting to collect them, and I can see that the counter's going up as I'm going around. But I really like the idea of having the little trail that shows me where I should be going, so that's quite nice. What else can I see on my screen? I can see which player is playing. So at the bottom, I can see that player 1 is me, and I'm running around. I can't remember what the name of that character is. Let me go back and have a look at my sheet. So you might remember that as part of our worksheets, we also had some reference sheets that we could look at that told us a little bit about the different characters. So I'm going to go back and have a look at what the name of this character that I'm playing is, because I can't actually remember. Oh, it's Mazu, that's who I'm playing with at the moment. So I presume that later on I'm going to maybe add more people to my party. So that's what we call when you have more than one like playable character. So along the bottom there I can see that player 1 is Mazu, and then there's player 2, player 3, player 4. So either there's opportunity to have multiplayer games, or there is maybe the possibility to have a party with multiple people in it, potentially. it's also got something on the top that's showing me the egg, and I presume that the little like spaces next to the egg are where I'm going to like collect them. I'm guessing. I don't really know. I've got zone map, which looks like if I press minus, it's going to bring up a map, which it does. So that's something else that I didn't have in my design. That might be something I might want to add. So it's almost like what we call an overlay. So it's got an overlay over the top that allows you to play the game. And it's got like various different things, like an overlay menu. So that's something else I might want to consider adding to my game. In fact, I think that's probably something I'm going to focus on for my ideas for improvements later on. So I'm going to go back and carry on. So let's carry on along this path. I can still see my little trail. Oh, another little cutscene.
Friends find the raptors. They still have the egg. The ground begins to tremble. A large shadow covers them. Gigantosaurus has arrived. The raptors flee in panic. The egg soars through the air. Catch it, Rocky, catch it. The egg is safe and sound. Giganto clomps away. But where'd this egg come from? Who will show us the way? What's that up in the sky? Our friend Hagen appears. Rocky gives her the egg. Can you take it from here? The friends give their thanks. As Hagen takes to the sky, the egg will soon be back in its nest. The dinos swell with pride. Something falls from the sky. A meteorite from space. It blocks up the volcano. Then the savannah starts to shake. More rocks rain down from the sky above. One blocks the dino's den. Hagen tries to avoid them. Be careful of the egg. Hagen flies to and fro to escape the rock storm safely. The egg falls from her beak. That poor little dino baby. The dinos rush towards their den to view the volcano with their telescope. A giant rock blocks their path. Now their plan has little hope. Then Mazu remembers something. Her trusty Stargazer. The only thing that they need now is to climb high upon that mesa.
Okay, so once again, we've got another little cutscene that's told us like what our next part of our quest is. And again, we've got some instructions showing us on screen what should be happening, that we need to get to a high point in order to be able to use our Stargazer. So let's carry on. You can see some of the other characters are now starting to appear and are dancing on the screen as well. So I'm going to continue to follow the little trail so I know where I'm going, which again, I really like that as a little way of playing the game. Okay, so now it's telling me I can press B to speed up, so I'm going to do that. So again, show me the instructions on the screen. So it's avoiding the need for a separate screen to tell us how to play the game. And now it's telling me press B to jump, press Y to hit with my tail. So I've got B to jump and Y to hit my tail. Okay, so I'm going to attack this funny little thing here. And I did it, yay, awesome. So I'm going to clear up those. And I know that I can press B to jump, so I'm going to start to jump up here and attack these little bits of vegetation and collect up the droplets seems to have come out of them. I don't know quite what they're meant to be. So I'll collect those up. I'm going to jump up here. I'll jump up here. So another thing that I've noticed that is different to my game is it's got these lovely little arrows as well that show us where to go. So now it's also telling me that I can change between different characters. I can press R on my Switch to change to a different character. So if I press R, it's going to swap me out for a different one, which is kind of cool. So that's something that I haven't seen previously, and it's also got the arrow showing me that the next place I need to go is across this area here. And I can also see that it's telling me that I've not got the right character selected yet, so I need to actually change again and until I've found the Triceratops. And again, I'm going to look through the sheets to remind myself what she or he is called. I can't remember if it's a boy or a girl. And that character is called that is Tiny. So I need to swap to that character. So I need to keep pressing until the bubble makes Tiny, which is still not Tiny. There we go, so I've got Tiny now. So each dino has its own special abilities. So that's kind of a little bit like my character select, but it's done a little bit differently because obviously in this game it's not allowing you to select the different characters from the very beginning. Okay, so that I think I'm going to leave the play testing of the game there because that's a nice place to stop. And I've got quite a few things to think about in comparison to my game. So hopefully you've quite enjoyed having a little look at Gigantosaurus in terms of comparing it to our prototype and had a little look at a play test of playing the game. So I'm going to hop back over onto the visualizer and then we're going to have a look at some of the differences in actually the playing of the game. So hop onto the visualizer and let's have a think about that now. So the last thing that we're going to look at is the actual level design of the game that we're playing. So the third bit is the level. So level 1. So similarities was that although my game, as I talked about earlier, would have been PC based and it was going to use the arrow keys, it's quite similar in some ways to how the game worked in that rather than using arrow keys, you're using the joystick. So rather than using arrow keys, I was using the joystick here to move my character around. So that's quite similar sort of concept in terms of actual movement. So we're going to put that down as a similarity. So movement based on sort of like a direct direction of joystick or arrows, which would have been on the keyboard. Okay, so differences. I had a few differences. So I had that like trail that I could follow, which I talked about as being quite a nice example. That little trail, that twinkling trail, showing me where to go. So let's pop that in there. So the differences were there was a trail to follow to show where to go. What else have I got? The other things that I've got were it also has those arrows showing you where to go as well. So let's pop that in too. So also arrows to show direction. Okay, and the other thing that we had that was different was this overlay. So the overlay which has a mixture of instructions and menus over the top. Okay, so there's my similarities and differences between those screens. Excellent. So let's just hop back over into our presentation and have a look at what we're going to think about next. So we have identified quite a lot of similarities and differences between our two games in our game comparison document. Well done. Hopefully you've done that with me as well and you've really thought about what's similar and what was different. And now you're ready to think about the next stage. So we've played the release version of the game and we've done some analysis to compare it to our prototype. The other thing that we are going to do is look at some of the released game features, and we're going to think about the features and the interactions that we liked in the released version and explain why we liked them. So that means we can go into a little bit more detail about the kind of things that we particularly liked in the game. So that's what we're going to do next. So if I go back onto the game just for a moment so you can be reminded about a few bits and pieces, we can really focus in on some of the key things that were good in the released game. Now, when we're doing this, I want you to really think particularly about the kind of things that you might want to include in your game. So this is not necessarily so much about thinking about your original prototype idea now, but starting to think about what things from the game could you start to use in your prototype. So what things could you add? What things could you modify? What things could you completely change. Okay, so that's what we're going to start to think about. So the first feature that I particularly liked was the use of cutscenes. So the feature was cutscenes, and what I liked about it was I liked that they were quite short. So I'm not a big fan of really long cutscenes that take you out of the gameplay for too long, but I really liked the idea that it kind of introduced the little quest that you were going to be completing, and I thought that was quite a nice touch. It meant you could kind of watch it and that you knew what you were going to be doing next and then get on with it. So what I liked about this feature was that it introduces the quest that you needed to complete. Oops. And I thought, yeah, that was it. That's what I liked about it. The next feature that I really liked was the overlay. So if we look, we can see it at the moment with the game. We've got the overlay over the top. We talked about that a little bit as we were doing the play testing. I really like that. I think it's a really nice thing to have in your game because it makes it, it means that you can do quite a lot more with your game. You can have various other things going on that you can select and swap between by having an overlay that also incorporates some menu items. So that's something else I'm going to have on my features that I like. So I'm going to go for the overlay. I'm going to call it an overlay menu. And what I liked about it is that I like that you can add more functionality by showing things that you can switch between on the menu. So showing what you can switch between on the overlay menu. There we go. Okay, so what else did I like? I liked the little the little path that it's showing you, so you knew which way to go. I think that's a really nice touch, especially for games where, remember we talked about this being a type of game that would probably be played by someone that either hasn't played any other games previously, or it might be their first game. So that was something else that we quite liked as well. So I'm going to put that down there as one of my features. I like the little trail to show where to go. And I like that that just means it gives the player a little bit of help in case they get lost, basically. So it helps the player know what to do. Particularly for our audience, because we said that it might be people that play for the first time, I think that's particularly important for them. Other features that I like that, I don't know if you spotted, I'm just going to pop the game catcher on for just for a minute and hopefully you'll see that Tiny, when you leave her standing there for a while, there's a little animation that the character like cuts over into, and hopefully you might just see it in a moment. Yeah, there you go, a little dancing animation and a little spin. So I quite like that as well, so I'm going to add that onto mine. And they are called idle animations. So idle animations are just little things that happen. Look, there she goes again. Little things that happen when you aren't actually pressing the buttons on your controller or on your keyboard. So what I like about it, it just adds a little bit of interest if you're not making your character move at that moment. So adds something interesting to the character when not moving. Okay, I'm going to think of a few more bits that I think are quite nice in the game. A thing I like is the use of arrows to show you the direction that you're going in. So use of arrows. And again, that just helps the player know what to do. And again, that comes back to the idea of being a game that's played by people that might not have played games before, and it's really nice to give them that little bit of information should they get a bit lost. The other thing I really liked was the fact that you can switch between the different characters by actually just using the shoulder buttons. These are called shoulder buttons here, and I can just switch between them by pressing those. I think that's quite a nice touch. So maybe that's something I could swap on mine. So rather than having to select which character you want to race with at the beginning of the race, maybe I could have something similar and have it so that you can switch the player mid-race. And maybe they even float in on bubble and like take over from the character that you've switched out. I think that's quite a nice idea. So that's something else I'm going to add to my sheet. So that is switch player during gameplay. And what I like about that feature is it allows you to have like different moves for the different characters, because I don't know if you spotted, but one of the things it started to tell me was that the different characters have their own special moves. I'll see if I can show you that. So if I press A with Tiny, you should see that she has a special move. There you go, which is to run like a crazy thing and knock things over. And if I swap to Mazu and press A, the special move for Mazu was to go really fast in the water. So I can't actually show you the special move for that right this minute. So there we go. So if I swap back over to Tiny, so all of them have their own special moves that are relevant in different situations. So I can't show you the right special moves because there's actually no reason for the special move to be shown right this minute, but you just saw Tiny's special move, which was to knock things over. So that's something else I think that's quite nice about the idea to have this switching players during gameplay, because it means that you can have like special moves for the different races. Remember, my version of the game was a race game again, so yours might not be relevant for that because you might not be using the same kind of ideas as me. So what I like about this feature is it allows for each player character to have special moves, and it also means I don't need to have the player select screen at all anymore, because I can then control that all through my overlay menu instead. So I'm going to put that in there as well if I can just fit it in. So no character select screen needed. Just about squeeze that in. Okay, so finishing off the last couple of ideas of things that we could include. In my version of the game, I didn't have any real enemies. I just had it that you had to avoid the things that you're collecting for each of your characters. So that's the feature that I can add here as well. So the feature was enemies. There we go. And I quite liked that because again you have something that you can interact with, which is another character you can interact with. There we go. And finally, my last feature is going to be the map. So, and that again, I really like that because it gave you an idea of what, so sort of the scope of the game, how big the game is, and also it helps you to get an idea of where you are within the map itself. And for my idea with my racing game, that could work quite nice. So it shows the scope of the game, or the size of the game, and shows you where you are. There we go. So there is my features and what I particularly liked about the release game features. Okay, excellent. So hopefully you've done that. Feel free to pause if you need a bit more time filling in your release game features and also what you liked about them. But I'm going to be heading over to have a look at what we're going to do next. But feel free, if you do need a bit more time, to just pause the stream, fill in your sheet, and then join on with us when you're ready. Do be aware though, if you do pause the stream, you'll need to skip it back to carry on from where you left off, because it will just carry on from where we are currently. So just be aware of that. Okay, so we've looked at the release game features, we've made a list of them, and then we've thought about the things that we particularly liked about them, and we've filled in that release game features sheet. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to choose one of the features that you've identified and plan how you could add this to your prototype version using a new interaction sheet. So I think the thing that I'm going to focus on for mine is going to be the overlay menu. I think it's really useful and I really like that idea. So that's what I'm going to focus on. So I'm going to go back to my interaction sheet that I did as part of my prototype idea last time. And I'm going to use that as a starting point for doing my new interaction sheet that's going to go over the top. So effectively, most of what's going to happen in here, the interactions and events, aren't really going to change because they're still going to be part of the game. But on top of what you can see on the camera, you are also going to have this overlay that's going to fit over the top. So I am going to be a little bit lazy in how I design this because of I'm aware of how much time we have, and I don't want you to have to sit and watch me draw things over the top. As usual, if you haven't got a copy of the sheet, that's fine. Grab yourself a notepad instead or some paper. That's absolutely fine. Don't feel you have to be using our worksheets. It's really not an issue at all. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do the overlay menu straight onto this sheet. So that's what I'm going to be doing next. So don't feel that you have to draw everything that you did last time. You can do things where you're sort of, the idea is that this is going to go over the top. I have on my screen in front of me the actual game to give me some ideas about the kind of things I might want to include in that overlay. Okay, so it's called an overlay because it literally lays on top of what we can see beneath. Okay, so on my overlay, I think I'm going to do similar. I'm going to have the characters along the bottom in a similar way to the real game. So effectively, I'm actually kind of incorporating two things. So although I've said I'm actually going to focus on doing the overlay menu, I'm actually going to also be slightly adding in the switch player during gameplay, because that's something that's going to be built into the overlay menu. So I'm going to have the different characters along the bottom, and there is going to be Tiny, and there's her little beak. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to have the other characters, and you can tell which one's selected, I think, in my version, because it's going to be like a circle, a coloured circle that goes around them. Now I'm going to go back to my reference sheets to remind myself exactly what the different characters' faces look like. So excuse me as I just scroll back through my pages. Obviously, if you don't have the printed version, that's fine. As we talked about last time, you can access these on our website. They are the reference sheets, and you can just have a look at them on screen. So it's in the same place as these worksheets came from, and it's the reference sheets. So I've already got Tiny. I need to add in Mazu, so I'm going to pop this on one side. I'm actually going to fold it in half so I can see what I'm doing a little bit more easily. And I'm going to have a little picture of Mazu. Again, my drawing skills, I'm sure, are not as good as yours. So this is just ideas. Thank goodness I don't normally have to draw things, because I'm not all that great. But it doesn't matter. I'm having a go. That's the main thing. My programming skills are definitely the better thing. So there we go. There is my Mazu. There we go, there's my Mazu. I'm going to have, next one is going to be Rocky, which is this one here. So I'm going to add Rocky in, and Rocky is going to go here. And I've got the idea, remember, that you can switch between them now just by pressing a different button. And I'm going to choose the button to switch play, and I'll write it over here in a minute. So here is my Rocky, and he's got this little smiley face. There we go. There's my Rocky, and I need to give him a bit of colour, like so. And last but not least, we also have Bill. So let's pop Bill in as well. So Bill's going to go in here. There we go. And his little mouse is just there. I'm sure again that your drawings are much better than mine. There we go. Okay, there's my Bill. So I had the idea that you're can tell which one you're using because there's going to be a little coloured circle around them. So I'm going to add a bit of colour to my little circle now. And I think you want to make it quite obvious that that's the one that's being played at the moment. And I'm going to colour that in red. I'm not going to spend too much time colouring in the other ones because I haven't got a great deal of time. but obviously they would normally be coloured in. So we can see the coloured ones on there. The other thing that we're going to have, I think probably would be worthwhile having on my overlay, is a timer, because one of the things that we talked about last time with my idea of my sort of race away from the volcano was that it was going to be like a timed thing as well, that there was going to be a certain amount of time that you had to be able to get away. So I'm going to have a timer up here. I'm just going to put like a 60-second timer up in the top corner, and that would then be timing down to get away. And also I'm going to have that idea of having a little map in the corner there. Oops. There we go, little map. And I'm also going to have up here, we had like collectible items, and I had different collectible items for the different characters. I'm going to keep that. So to show the different collectibles, we're going to have the different shapes. So if I go back to my design ideas, I had different collectible items for each character. So I'm just going to go right back to my initial ideas sheet. So I said that Mazu had the orange globes, Bill had blue cubes or blue squares, depending if it was a 2D or 3D game. Rocky has diamonds and Tiny has hearts. So I'm going to pop those up here. So Tiny has, whoops, I did that wrong. I haven't got a rubber to hand, but I'm sure that you will do. So you can erase that. So there's my heart for Tiny. Then we have Mazu has the little orange globes. Then we have Bill with, he has his squares. And finally we have Rocky, which is the diamonds. There we go. And I'm also going to have like a number underneath to show how many you've collected, but this is going to be the start, so they're going to be 0 at the moment. Obviously those would all be coloured in, but I'm not going to do that now because I don't want to spend too much time on this, and we're almost running out of time already, so it's gone really quickly today. So there is my overlay. So I've got a couple of conditions I want to add on, and one of the things I added in last time was that although it is going to be controlled using the keyboard, I also was going to allow some mouse click interactivity, so I'm going to add a little bit of that in. So when you click on the map, it's going to open the map. The timer, the condition of the timer is it's just going to be every 1 second number is going to go down or decrease. There we go. We have the switching between the different characters. We're going to press, I think, so when you press the S key on the keyboard and then the arrows to switch, and it's going to switch the character. And then finally, when you collide, so when you crash into, when you collide with a shape, remember it's the shape that's correct for your character. So shape for character, oops. We're going to make it so that the number under that shape goes up by 1. There we go. Okay, so there I've added the interactions and the events that are going to happen as a result of adding my overlay to my design. So there's my original design with like the lava flowing down and this pathway that you need to be running down to get away from the volcano, which is erupting. And there's the overlay that would sit over the top of that, and we've added the interactivity that's going to go with that overlay. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to do that yourself. As usual, if you need it, please feel free to pause and spend a bit longer over your modifications of your ideas. But if you're ready to move on with me, we're going to have a look at what the last part of this workshop is now. Okie dokie, so hopefully you have already done this bit, but let's just pop it up just in case you haven't. So you should be modifying your prototype. You should have completed a sheet like that one, with your new interactions showing how you are going to make changes to your game based on the actual release title that we just had a look at the beginning of this session. If you haven't, as I said, pause the stream now, finish off your worksheet, think about the new interactions and events, the conditions and the actions that are going to happen with your new version. Once you've done that, you then have completely modified your prototype and come up with a new way that it might work as a result of what we've learned from playing the game. So, well done. You've now completed your prototype game, and you've made improvements based on your own feedback that you've done by playing another title and thinking about how the things that you've learned from playing that game could be incorporated into your game. So you have completed today's workshop. So in this workshop, you've learned about how to compare two games, and you've thought about how to modify a game using features from another. Well done. I wanted to just very quickly talk about what you could do if you fancied building your game yourself. So here are a couple of ideas of what you could do if you do fancy having a go at doing this. So what you could do is, first of all, you could head into our resources section, which I'll show you again where to find them, and actually download the PartBaked games version of Gigantosaurus, which includes all of these lovely assets. So if you've already watched our first PartBaked Games workshop, you'll know what I mean by assets, but just in case you haven't, an asset is a image or a sound or music or literally anything that you need to have in a game. So these assets are all the image files that you can use in the game, and they've already been added. I would really strongly suggest that if you haven't done PartBaked Games, just the original PartBaked Games, you go and do that first before you have a go at creating your game. But once you've done that, you can then download the Gigantosaurus PartBaked Games file in Construct 3 and have a go at actually building your own prototype, an actual digital prototype. You can even base it around your paper prototype that you've developed over these two parts of this workshop. So if you want to do that, that's absolutely brilliant, and I'm going to very quickly show you where to find the resources for that if you do fancy having a go at that. So if you fancy having a go at developing your own version of your game, so an actual digital playable version, head over to our website, which, as I said before, is digitalschoolhouse.org.uk. Go to resources and then click on live workshops. Find PartBaked Games Chef's Edition, and if you haven't, if you're watching this on YouTube, you might need to scroll further down the page. So open up the PartBaked Games Chef's Edition page, go to where it says access all files here, and that will load a Google Drive. So this is our Google Drive where we store files that are a little bit too big or aren't as easy to download. So you can download them straight from here. You'll see there's a file called Gigantosaurus PartBaked.c3p. That's a Construct 3 file. So as I said, if you haven't used Construct 3 before, go and have a look at the first PartBaked Games workshop and have a go at making the game in that, which is it's called Run the Gauntlet, and you get a really good idea of how to play the game in there. So if you right click on that, you can then download it straight to your computer, and then that PartBaked Games workshop the original PartBaked Games explains how to open that in the software. So I'm not going to go into detail on that now. The other thing that you will need is, if you have a look at the second part of the student reference sheets, which is the sheet that we were looking at earlier that had all the pictures in it, all the different assets that you can use for the game. If you go right down to the bottom of that, there are some recipe cards for creating different game rules from the BAFTA game cards that we used for generating a game idea. So for example, remember the rules are things like can only move forwards, bounce off walls, etc. And these are the recipe cards of how to add the behaviours and events that you'll need to actually implement that in Construct 3. Behaviour is spelt like that because that's how it's spelt in Construct 3. So just be aware that's what you're looking for, behaviour. I'm aware that that's the American spelling. That's just because it is like that in the software. Okay, so that's pretty much everything that we're going to be looking at today. I'm going to hop over into the chat now if you have any questions. So I'm in the chat now. Feel free to ask if you have any thoughts, questions, etc. about what we've been doing today. And hopefully you will have some nice questions for me. So DSH has just popped in the YouTube Digital Schoolhouse channel as well, so be aware that's where you need to go if you want to access the PartBaked Games original workshop, if you're interested in having a go at making that game in Construct 3. So I'll just give you a little bit longer in case you have got any questions for me. So I'm just dancing away to the music, I can't help it. Okay, I don't think we've got any questions today, so hopefully that has really sparked your interest in creating your own game. We've covered a lot of things today. We've gone into quite a lot of detail about creating paper prototypes, and hopefully you've really enjoyed that. So all that leaves for me to do is to say thank you for taking part. I hope you've had fun and learned something new. If you have enjoyed this workshop, check out our YouTube channel for more follow-along activities. If you've got any questions or feedback for me, please email dsh@ukie.org.uk. Now, we'd love to see you learning computing at home with Digital Schoolhouse. Parents and guardians, please feel free to share any images or videos using the hashtag computingathome on Twitter or on Facebook. Also, for those of you who love writing, Digital Schoolhouse have launched a creative writing competition, which you can find out more information about on our website. If you're the parent of a primary age pupil and you're interested in finding out about Digital Schoolhouse and how they can work with your child's school, you can find out more about our programme on our website, which is digitalschoolhouse.org.uk. You can also find our contact information in the section below or at the end of this video. Lastly, I wanted to say a huge well done for taking part today. I'm Estelle and I look forward to seeing you next time.